Hey, I'm Aharon Rabinowitz, and you're watching Red Giant TV. Oh, I'm excited. I'm not kidding you. I've been waiting years to do this tutorial, no joke. In this episode of Red Giant TV, we're going to look at an often overlooked and underestimated plugin called Trapcode Sound Keys, and we're going to use sound keys to drive time. I'll explain that in a moment. But first, you may have already heard of Trapcode Sound Keys, and you may even already own it. It comes as a part of the Trapcode suite, and of course you can buy it alone as well. But the truth is that this plugin, while quite powerful, is not as well known as some of the other plugins out there. Think of it this way. If the Trapcode suite were a family, you'd have your outgoing kids like Shine and Particular who are all like, "Look at me, look at me!" And then you'd have the quiet middle child like Sound Keys, who doesn't get much attention, but goes out into the world and really works well with others. You can tell I majored in psychology, right? Well, that's the thing about Sound Keys. It's a plugin that on its own doesn't do much, but when combined with audio and other layers or effects, Sound Keys has the ability to drive animation. For example, if I wanted to have particles emitted every time there was a timpani hit in the music to which I was animating, I could do this by hand, which is kind of a pain, or I could use Sound Keys to isolate that part of the audio and then have it tell Particular to emit particles. And the same thing can be done with transformation properties. For example, I can have Sound Keys animate the scale of a layer based on sound. Okay, I know what you're thinking. After Effects can already do this. I don't need Sound Keys for this kind of thing. And in fact, previously, I did a 2-part tutorial at Creative Cow called Creating a Custom Waveform that really delves into the concept of audio-driven animation. But while it's true that After Effects can generate keyframe data from audio, you have no control over how it does that, and the end result is a very limited tool for creating this kind of animation. Trapcode Sound Keys, on the other hand, gives you true control over how the audio is translated into keyframes, which means we have the ability to create animation that truly reflects our audio, but with minimal work involved. Anyway, if you don't have Sound Keys and you want to follow along, you can download a free trial from the Red Giant software website. Okay, as I said, we're going to create an animation in which our audio drives time. It goes something like this. Here we are in After Effects in a composition. I have my audio, that's the drum beat extracted from one of the multi-layered songs in the Smart Sound Strata series, and you're hearing that audio in the background now. I also have this video footage of cars driving in New York from Artbeat's Streets of New York stock library. If you're looking for any kind of footage like this, cars on the street, aerials of famous cities, then check out the Artbeat's website. They have a lot of cool stuff in this genre, among other things. Anyway, we're going to use the drum audio to make our car footage speed up and slow down, basically syncing the speed of the video to the audio. Every time there's a beat, our video will speed up and then slow back down. So let's get to it. Create a new solid layer by choosing Layer, New, Solid. In the dialog, rename it to SK for Sound Keys, just to keep things organized. The color and the size don't matter, although it's easier to work with if you set it to the same size as the composition. Then click OK to confirm the creation of the solid. Next, with our solid selected, choose Effect, Trapcode, Sound Keys. As you can see, in the composition window, we now have the Sound Keys effect visible over our footage, which makes it hard to work with. Ultimately, we'll be turning off visibility for this layer, but for now, let's use the solo switch to solo it so that it's easier to see. Okay, much better. If you scroll through time, you won't see much of anything, but that's about to change. Go into the Effects panel and set the audio layer pull down to our audio layer, Kinetic Signal. Now, if you scroll through time, you can see an animated visualization of the audio spectrum. In other words, the different bands of audio are represented in colors getting taller or shorter depending on volume. Bass is in the red, orange, yellow area, mids in the greens, and trebles are in the blues. For our effect, we're going to isolate the heavy beat sounds that are in our bass. So, in the Effects panel, twirl down Range 1. Sound Keys gives us the ability to isolate up to 3 sound ranges, but in this project, we'll just use 1. And on that point, notice the checkbox here called Active. Each range has a checkbox for this. Right now, the only active range is 1, and I know this because at the bottom of the Sound Keys effect, only the number 1 is turned on here. Also, take note of this property called Type. currently set to average. That means however many bands of audio that we select, SoundKeys will take an average of them to create its keyframes. But in truth, it doesn't really matter here. I'm only going to use one band of the audio. But if you were using many and you only wanted the highest value, you could use the option called peak of range. Or if you wanted SoundKeys to generate keyframes that were either all or none values, you'd set this to on-off trigger. I won't get into that here, but I'll tell you that if used properly, you could use the audio to switch between two values that you set. So for example, you could use it to make a layer 0% or 100% opaque, but nothing in between, if those are the values that you want to use. You could just as easily set it to be either 25% or 75% opaque. Those values are entirely up to you. Anyway, let's isolate the drum beats, and we'll use those to control the timing. You won't be able to hear this due to the way that I'm recording, so I apologize. But if I do a RAM preview, I can see that my drums are registering here in the bass on the left side. Every time there's a major drum hit, my oranges jump. What I need to do then is mark the loudest part of that jump, or at least the loudest part that I want registered, and then I'll do the same for the softest part in that audio band that I want registered as well. Based on the area that I select, I'll be able to create a range of values that After Effects can work with. Look, I'll explain more in a little bit, but we're still missing a few pieces of the puzzle, so hang in there. I'll go to the Effects panel, and I'll click on the Range 1, Corner 1 target, and in my composition window, I'll mark the top of the range that I want to isolate. You can also just drag the corner targets if you want. Okay, I'll do the same with the Range 1, Corner 2 target for the bottom. Now it may take a little tweaking to get this just right, but eventually you'll have a good range of values defined. And you can see how that audio is being registered by SoundKeys by looking at the outputs area here in the comp window on the right. If I scroll through time, I can see that every time my audio band runs through my defined area, it registers in output 1. When it goes to the top of my defined area or above it, the output is fully bright green. If it goes below my defined area, it's dark green. And of course, anything in the middle of my range shows up here in varying degrees. Okay, next, jump into the Effects panel and set the Fall-Off property pull-down to None. This means that at each frame, the value generated at each previous frame will be added to the next one. This will make more sense in a few moments. The other options here are for different ways of controlling how the values at one frame affect the values of the next. You can have very abrupt transitions between values, or the values can ease into each other over time, creating a much smoother animation based on the audio. This is very important because this is one of the things about SoundKeys that gives it such an advantage over After Effects when it comes to creating audio keyframes. After Effects uses the instant method, which means very abrupt changes in value. And another difference is that After Effects also can't isolate areas of the audio to analyze, at least not well. It just uses everything. So the end result is that you get very abrupt changes in value, and those values are based on the entire audio, which means that the data is often useless anyway. SoundKeys, on the other hand, gives you real precision, and not just in the way that it listens to the audio, also in the way that it translates it to numerical values, and I'll show you that now. In the Effects panel, set the Output Min-Max property to Custom. There are other commonly used options here, each for different purposes. The idea being that you set a highest possible number and a lowest one, and based on the audio, the values generated will fall within this range. But you want those values to be meaningful based on what you're doing. You might use the 0 to 100 option if you plan on affecting a layer's opacity, since opacity only goes from 0 to 100%. But the 0 to 360 option might be a better choice if you're using SoundKeys to affect a layer's rotation. And the other options each have situations in which they can be very useful. But we're going to use Custom to define our own range of values. I'm going to set my minimum value to 0 and my maximum value to 0.3. Okay, now let's explain what we just did. Earlier, we used the range selector to isolate the levels of audio that we wanted to use in our calculations. In other words, we defined a highest and lowest point in the audio band's volume that SoundKeys would listen to and convert to numbers. Then we set our minimum and maximum values that would be generated based on that isolated audio. So at the defined area's highest point or anything above, we get a value of 0.3. and in the defined area's lowest point or below, we get a value of 0. And anything in between the top and bottom will range in value anywhere between 0 and 0.3. Furthermore, by setting our falloff property to none, we told sound keys to keep adding the generated values one on top of the next. Meaning, for example, that if at frame 1 the value of the audio is translated as 0.2 and at frame 2 it's 0.3, the overall value will become 0.5. And if at frame 3 the audio is translated as 0.1, the overall value of 0.5 gets added to 0.1, which is 0.6, and so on and so on and so on. Each frame's value is added to the last. Now, I know that small numbers like this may not seem like a lot, but for what we're doing, trust me, it's plenty. We're going to use this range of values to control time through time remapping. And in time remapping with sound, a little dab will do ya. But first, we have to tell sound keys to convert the audio to keyframes. Up until now, we've just been setting up the way in which sound keys would measure and calculate the audio, but it hasn't actually done anything yet. So in the effects panel, hit the button called Apply. If you look at the property called Output 1, you can see by the bluish area running through it that it now has keyframes. And if we go into the timeline and hit U to reveal keyframes, we'll see all of the Output 1 keyframes laid out in time. That done, click on the Sound Keys Layer's eyeball switch to make it invisible, which also deactivates its solo switch, and everything comes back. Okay, time for time remapping. Select the video layer, that's our cars, and choose Layer, Time, Enable Time Remapping. Let me give you a very fast explanation of time remapping. Each frame of video has a frame number. The first frame of the video is frame 0, the next is frame number 1, the next is 2, etc., etc. Normally, video plays in such a way that the frames play in order and at a constant speed. If you're working at 30 frames per second, then during the first second of video, frames 0 through 29 will play through. But when we enable time remapping, things change. By default, we get 2 time remap keyframes, one at the beginning of the footage and one at the end. These keyframes tell After Effects that at the beginning, it should show the first frame, and at the last keyframe here at the end, it should show the last frame of video. And in between, it should show every frame from one to the next. Now, left as it is, the video would play back at its normal speed. But if I drag the last keyframe closer to the first, then the video plays back faster because we've just pushed our first and our last keyframe of video closer together in time. And that's not all. If I reverse the order of these 2 keyframes, the video plays back backwards. Furthermore, I can add more keyframes and then move them around in time, making the video play back faster, then slower, and backward over time. Whatever I want to do. Maybe get a little Benny Hill action going on. Now, you may have noticed that when I enabled time remapping for my video footage, there were no visible keyframes. And that's because my footage doesn't start or end inside the bounds of this composition. Time remap keyframes are added at the beginning and the end of the footage, not at the beginning and the end of the composition. If I were to slide things down in time a bit, you can see that I have a keyframe at the beginning of my footage, and there's also one at the end. Let me just undo that. Okay. Now, why did I get into all of that? Well, we're going to use time remapping to make our video play back to the beat of our audio by taking the values we generated through sound keys and then connecting them with the video's time remap property. So basically, every time I hear the drum hit, I want the video to jump forward in time. To make this happen, I need to add an expression. Oh, hey, don't get your boxers up in a bundle. I know expressions can be scary, but this one will be simple. I'll alt-click on the time remap keyframe stopwatch, and then I'll drag the expression pick whip to the Output 1 property, and then I'll click Enter on the number pad to confirm the expression. If I do a quick RAM preview, I can see that now my car video is playing back to the beat, stopping when there is no beat, but jumping forward in time when there is one. Okay, so how does this work? Well, remember all those values we generated with sound keys? You know, the numbers between 0 and 0.3? And remember how we set them up so that each value added to the next one? Well, when we connect those values to time remapping, they're translated into seconds, meaning that a value of 0.3 is 30% of a second. So for every frame of audio with a volume at the top of the range, we're going to add 30% of a second on top of the current time remapping value, meaning we're going to jump ahead about 9 frames of video at each frame where the drum beat is the loudest. And that can add up very quickly because if, for even 5 frames, the audio band gets loud enough to fall into the defined range, we could jump as much as 45 frames or a second and a half further into our video clip. Also, I want to point out that if we had used any of the other fall-off methods, the values would have gone up during the drum hit, but then gone back down after it. That would make the footage jump forward in time to the beat, but jump backwards when the beat was gone. All in all, what we've done here looks pretty cool. But I'm not satisfied. I want the video to jump forward in time on the beat, but I want it to play at a normal speed when that's not happening. Now, we'll need to access our time remap keyframes to make it play the video from the first time remap keyframe to the last one so that it plays when the audio hasn't hit threshold. Right now that can't happen because the expression that we've created basically says ignore the keyframes for time remapping and instead use the sound keys keyframes. So what we need to do is tell the layer's time remapping property to do a combination of both the time remap keyframes and the sound keys keyframes. That means editing the expression. But don't worry, this is super easy. You're only going to have to type in one character. In the timeline, click into the expression editor, which will highlight the entire expression. Then click again at the front of the expression so that none of the text is selected and that the cursor is at the front of the expression. Now click on the expression pick whip and drag it to the time remap property. Then just type in the plus sign and click out or hit enter on the number pad to confirm the expression. That's it. We're done. Now do a RAM preview and you'll see that time moves normally off the beat but much faster when the drum hits. And that's because we just told the layer that it should use the keyframed values in time remapping, which will make it play normally. But it should also add the sound keys output property values on top of that. And since those values are usually 0 unless there's a drum hit, we'll only see a speed increase when that hit happens. Okay, one last thing, and it's not a deal breaker. Turn on frame blending for both the composition and for the layer. This will blend the frames during a speed change, giving us some simulated motion blur as the cars speed up and slow down. A quick RAM preview, and there you go. Nice. Whew. Do you feel smarter? I know I do. My brain is tingling, but maybe that's just my shampoo letting me know it's working. Oh yeah, I record these tutorials in the shower. Saves time, but maybe not water. But anyway, if you really want to feel smart, save some cash when you buy Trapcode Sound keys. We're giving you a special price on sound keys just for watching this tutorial. So go to redgiantsoftware.com/promos to get this and other special Red Giant TV deals. Now, these are time-sensitive discounts. They will not last forever. All coupon codes expire 30 days from the launch date of each tutorial. So again, go to redgiantsoftware.com/promos to get the coupon codes for the most current Red Giant TV discounts. Once again, I'm Aharon Rabinowitz, and this is Red Giant TV. See you next time. Now, where is that loofah?